turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zohran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor f*** in the Oval Office last week.
Bill Maher struck again, and this time the Democratic Socialist crowd is definitely feeling the heat. In a segment that mixed sharp humor with tough truth, the blunt host explained why stubborn devotion to socialist ideas is a recipe for trouble, and why, whether people like it or not, capitalism still outperforms that philosophy every single time. At the center of his critique was Zohran Mamdani. And let's just say Maher didn't pull a single punch. Get ready because things heat up fast.
Democrats must recognize that Zohran Mamdani is the future of the party. Unfortunately, it's the Republican Party. Get it? And if you missed his victory speech in last week's mayoral election in New York, don't worry. You'll see it in every attack ad for the next 2 years. Now, Mamdani seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
Voters in New York brushed off Abigail Spanberger's warning and still chose a socialist. And honestly, this is textbook Democratic behavior. They love delivering speeches, hosting press events, and talking big about strategy. But when it comes to actually hearing what voters are worried about, they somehow miss the point entirely. It's the same pattern every cycle. The party drifts further left, insists nothing is wrong, and then acts stunned when the results hit them hard. What makes it even more confusing is that most Americans have clearly said they don't want socialism. They don't want the agenda. They don't want the financial risks. And they definitely don't want the instability that follows it. Yet the DNC keeps moving closer to the exact ideology people are pushing away. It's almost like the party can't resist walking straight into avoidable trouble.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office.
Maher, along with many longtime political observers and strategists, has been issuing the same warning for years. If Democrats want to stay alive politically, they need to shift back toward the middle. The point is straightforward and honestly overdue. The party has wandered so deep into ideological showmanship that it's forgotten what originally made liberal ideas attractive. Put simply, Maher says Democrats need to ditch the non-stop stream of woke agendas that push everyday voters away. People aren't asking for lectures. They aren't seeking culture battles. They're looking for real solutions, steadiness, and basic logic. By dropping the fringe fixations and returning to the core principles that once shaped liberalism, personal liberty, fairness, opportunity, and level-headed leadership. The party could rebuild the trust and support it has been losing for years.
Problem is, Gen Z thinks socialism's wired and capitalism's tired and billionaires are what's for dinner. And who can blame them? If you're 30 and still sharing a bathroom with roommates, capitalism isn't working for you. People will reject any economic system where there's strange hair on the soap. No one wants to be approaching middle age and still writing their name on food before they put it in the fridge. So they're quiet quitting capitalism and texting socialism that they're down to Thing is, socialism will you. Because socialism, to put it simply, just doesn't work and has never worked, like Kevin Federline.
We've repeated this on this channel more times than we can count, and we'll keep saying it because it's true. Socialism has consistently collapsed whenever it's been put into action. Sure, it sounds inspiring in theory, almost idealistic. The picture of total equality, shared resources, and a world where no one falls behind can easily sweep a newcomer off their feet. But the moment you step out of the fantasy and into reality, the flaws are impossible to miss. In actual practice, socialism always hits the same predictable obstacles rooted in human nature and motivation. People will always find loopholes in any structure, but socialism practically rolls out the red carpet for exploitation. Those in charge gain room to abuse it. Those without incentive drift through it. And the dream of fairness quickly transforms into stagnation, corruption, and economic collapse. That isn't negativity. It's history, evidence, and straightforward logic.
I know the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's Socialism for the 21st Century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century.
Interestingly, it's the younger crowd that seems most captivated by socialism. And it's pretty easy to see why once you dig beneath the surface. For many of them, anything they didn't witness firsthand feels like it was either done poorly or never genuinely attempted. History becomes optional. Experience becomes disposable. They convince themselves that if something collapsed before they arrived, it must be because the people who tried it lacked their creativity, their tools, or their modern mindset. This way of thinking leads them to believe they possess the special formula that can finally make an old, broken system function exactly the way they picture it. It's a blend of idealism, restlessness, and the belief that good intentions and new technology magically solve old failures. But the truth they often overlook is straightforward. Socialism hasn't collapsed because of the wrong leaders. It's collapsed because the model itself clashes with human nature. And no generation, no matter how confident, can change that.
Turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening.
Many young voters in New York are about to face a harsh wake-up call once Mamdani begins implementing his full lineup of socialist policies. The fantasy they've been sold, endless perks, free services, and no downside, is about to crash into the real world. It's always easy to get swept up in grand promises, but everything changes when those promises come straight out of your own paycheck. Mamdani is already openly pushing for New York to become financially self-reliant by hiking taxes. That alone should alarm anyone who's been paying attention. Residents are leaving the state in huge numbers because the taxes and cost of living are already overwhelming. And if these new socialist proposals move forward, that outflow will only speed up. Those who cheered the loudest will eventually realize socialism isn't a fantasy. It's a cost, and it always shows up in the end.
Zohran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
It's both fascinating and concerning how the Democratic Party, especially after the Obama era, has increasingly embraced ideas that sound inspiring but collapse when tested in the real world. Instead of prioritizing policies with proven outcomes, they often chase ideological concepts over practical solutions. Look at Kamala Harris, for instance, promoting policies that allow biological men to compete in women's sports while overlooking the clear physical advantages and the impact on fairness. Bernie Sanders pushes for a nationwide single-payer healthcare system, a compassionate vision on paper, but one that becomes tangled in massive costs, logistical hurdles, and government bureaucracy. And now, Zohran Mamdani imagines that prosperity will somehow come from free groceries and free bus rides, as if surface-level giveaways can fix deep, structural economic issues.
Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy.
Recently, I was catching up with an old friend, and this whole topic came up again. It immediately reminded him of something we've both noticed for years. Many of the very policies Ma warns about are already quietly woven into daily life. Programs that look harmless, free benefits, heavy government involvement, constant redistribution, have gradually expanded, creating a system that often rewards dependence rather than initiative. It's a slow-moving slope, but the consequences are becoming harder to ignore. From that conversation, and from watching the political landscape play out in real time, one thing is painfully clear: the Democratic Party needs a serious reality check. They must create distance between themselves and the socialist wing of the party and shift back toward practical, centrist policies that resonate with most Americans. If they don't, they'll continue drifting into ideological extremes, pushing voters away and setting the stage for outcomes that could spiral far beyond their control.
Platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
Everyone already knows who the unpredictable factor is in this equation, so there's no need to linger on that. What does deserve attention is what actually happened at the border during the Biden administration. Kamala Harris's role as the so-called border czar was met with widespread criticism, and not without justification. Ma points out that the border under Biden felt disorderly and overstressed, with systems buckling under pressure, weak management, and a complete lack of strategic oversight. It was a breakdown in planning, execution, and responsibility, and the entire infrastructure was pushed to its limits. What makes the situation even more ironic is the ongoing political theater around it. Many Democrats continue to attack Trump, painting his policies as cruel, while glossing over the fact that much of the border turmoil they now talk about was worsened under their own administration. Accountability, it seems, is the one thing in consistently short supply.
It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores? No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods. Governor-elect Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal. You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that shit again.
Some of the stories surrounding these socialist-leaning Democrats sound so over the top that people struggle to believe them. Maher's latest example proves it. Attendees were only allowed into a conference if they could display a photo of a negative COVID test. Just picture that. A digital snapshot became the deciding factor for who got in and who didn't. It feels ridiculous, almost like satire, but it also shows how extreme these policies can become in real time. And that's the larger warning. This isn't a one-off incident. It's a preview of what happens if full-blown socialist ideas start shaping policy nationwide. Rules like these often feel intrusive, unworkable, and downright suffocating, leaving people irritated and boxed in. It's a reminder of the massive disconnect between lofty ideals and the harsh realities that follow. The pattern is impossible to miss. From excessive pandemic restrictions to idealistic but unsustainable socialist proposals, the fallout keeps showing up. Younger voters might be captivated by the dream, but reality always delivers the wake-up call. History and lived experience repeat the same lesson. Socialism sounds inspiring, but collapses under real-world pressure. If Democrats want to stay competitive, they need to walk away from these extremes, move back to the center, and focus on practical policies that benefit everyday Americans. And that wraps up today's video. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this.